SLT Mobitel, the connection.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය 99.9% දක්වා විනාශ කිරීමට උපකාරී වන Surf Excel Hygiene Boosters.
Tonight, the writing on the wall. As travel restrictions leave streets deserted today, the former Prime Minister urges the government to lock down to save lives. You are covered. Good news for over 60s as health authorities announce green light for Sinopharm vaccinations. Booster shot. Sri Lanka gets an $80.5 million shot in the arm for its vaccination fund from the World Bank. Ready for anything. The Health Services Director General says Sri Lanka's ICU bed and oxygen supplies are stable.
We have another 680 beds, companies which are supplying the oxygen. They are able to provide more than this capacity, even 80 tons per day.
All this and much more coming up on this Friday, the 14th of May 2021.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න. හඳුන්වා දීමේ මිල රුපියල් 350යි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando. In your top stories for tonight, travel restrictions were ramped up covering the entire island in order to gain some control over the surging number of deaths and infections in the country brought on by a post-New Year third wave. The island-wide travel restrictions that came into force at 11 last night will remain in place until 4 a.m. on Monday, the 17th. Authorities continue to warn the public to stay home in order to stay safe, while reminding them of the repercussions if found to have violated health and safety protocols. In an attempt to control the spread of the novel coronavirus, the need to impose an island-wide quarantine curfew was felt last year, with the move coming into effect on the 20th of March 2020. The curfew was in place for several weeks and was later restricted to the Western province. After successfully controlling the first and the second wave, Sri Lanka enjoyed a quieter period, with the public returning to their normal routines. However, with the latest outbreak following the Sinhala and Tamil New Year season, the country was forced to impose island-wide travel restrictions that came into effect at 11 p.m. yesterday. What would normally be some of the busiest streets across the country were completely empty today, reminiscent of last year's lockdown. The island-wide travel restriction enforced last night will be in place until 4 a.m. on Monday, the 17th. Until then, members of the public will not be allowed to leave their homes, even using the reintroduced National Identity Card number system that will be in force from Monday onwards. The police have meanwhile warned of strict action to curtail any attempts by members of the public to circumvent the restrictions and move about during this period.
ප්‍රධාන පාරවල පොලිස් නිලධාරීන් මාර්ග බාධකාදී යොදාගෙන කරන රාජකාරියට අමතරව අතුරු මාර්ගවලට පොලිස් නිලධාරී කණ්ඩායම් යතුරු පැදි වලින් යොදවලා තිනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි සිවිල් අංශ වලින් දාලා බුද්ධ්‍යංශ වලින් යොදවලා තිනවා. මේ නීති රීති උල්ලංඝනය කරලා කිසියම් පිරිස් කඩ කරලා ක්‍රියා කරනවා නම් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් වැඩි ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගැනීම සඳහා මේ දවස් තුන තුල.
However, essential service providers will be allowed to continue operations in order to provide uninterrupted services. Accordingly, health service staff, police and tri-forces, utility service providers, ports and airport services, media personnel, judicial staff, commercial and financial service providers, agricultural service providers and pharmaceutical sector staff have been included in the list. Further transportation of vegetables and fruits too will be permitted during the restricted period. In the meantime, head of the National Operation for the Prevention of the COVID-19 outbreak, Army Commander General Shavendra Silva announced that travel will not be restricted for employees of apparel factories. Additionally, the Paliaguda fish market too will remain open for wholesale trade. However, vendors have decried a drop in sales due to the lack of traders. Further, the Manning Market too was kept open for trade today. Meanwhile, in Tambuttegama, vegetable farmers continued to bring their produce to the economic centre this morning, but to their disappointment, there were no traders to purchase their produce. A similar situation was experienced at the dedicated economic centre in Dambulla today as well. However, the government stepped in to remedy the situation by purchasing the produce through the area district secretariat. In the meantime, with the setting up of police checkpoints and roadblocks across the island, the police were able to prevent several attempts of unauthorised travel throughout the day. One such attempt involved a lorry transporting liquor under the guise of essential goods seized by the Kurdenyava police today.
Yesterday, within a period of 24 hours, 282 persons have been arrested in connection with the offences of face mask and social distancing. Total number of 9,029 suspects have been arrested in connection with the same offences since the 30th of October 2020 to date. Yesterday, the highest number of suspects have been arrested from Colombo North Division, Kuliyapitiya, Matale and Trincomalee areas. In addition to that, 1,596 persons who had violated the ID card number quarantine order. They have been admonished by police officers, but from Monday we are going to arrest them if they violate the special quarantine order that has been introduced.
Meanwhile, 38 Grama Niladari divisions across 3 districts were isolated today, the highest since the outbreak of the New Year cluster. The Kurunegala district saw the highest number of areas isolated today with 24 Grama Niladari divisions. Further, in Batiklo district, 6 Grama Niladari divisions in the Kirankulam police area were isolated today as well. In addition, 12 Grama Niladari divisions in the Trincomalee district were also added to the list of isolated areas today. According to Army Commander General Shavendra Silva, the state of isolation will come into effect after the island-wide travel restrictions are lifted on Monday at 4 a.m.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වාලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. අවුරුදු කේක් එක තියාරා.
කියලා හැදෙවෝ වගේ.
Speaking to the media today, opposition leader Sajid Premadasa pledged to provide opposition support for the allocation of funds through Parliament to provide economic relief to people affected by the spread of COVID-19. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has called on the government to heed the advice of health experts and lock down the country as the economy can be fixed, but the lives of the people cannot.
කොරෝනාව නිසා හැම අතකින්ම අපේ රට කඩා වැටිලා. එක පැත්තකින් වැක්සින් හිඟතාවෙ නිසා ජනතාවගේ ජීවිතවලට මරු පහරක් එල්ල වෙනවා. ජාතික ආර්ථිකය කඩන්නේ. කරුණා කරලා මේ රටේ සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාවට ආර්ථික ශක්තියක් ලබා දෙන්න. සුළු හා මධ්‍යම පරිමාණයේ කර්මාන්තකරුවන්ට එදා ලබා දුන්නු ණය විරාමය අහෝසි කරන්න නැතුව තවදුරටත් දික් කරන්න. මිනිසුන්ගේ ලීසින් සහනය තවදුරටත් කල් දාන්න. විපක්ෂය අපි ලෑස්ති ඕනම වෙලාවක පාර්ලිමේන්තුව හරහා ඇති තරම් ප්‍රතිපාදන වෙන් කරලා දෙන්න.
With that, United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe says that the government should prioritise public safety instead of economic recovery and lock down the country if that is the opinion of health experts.
අපේ රටේ එන්නත් හිඟයක් තියෙනවා. හැම එක්කෙනාටම එන්නත් ලැබලා දෙන්න එන අවුරුද්දේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්තම් මේ අවුරුද්දේ අවසානයේදී. ඒ වෙනකන් අපි ආරක්ෂා වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා ආණ්ඩුවේ යුතුයකම දැන් වෛද්‍ය උපදෙස් අනුව පියවර ගන්නට. ආර්ථිකයට සිදුවෙන හානිය අපිට ආපහු හදා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ ජීවිතයට ඇතිවෙන හානිය අපිට හදා ගන්න බෑ. ඒ උපදෙස් අනුව රට වහන්ට කියනවා නම් ඒකත් අපිට කරන්න සිදු වෙනවා.
Despite the country's growing COVID-19 infections, health authorities reassure the public that measures have been taken to deal with the rise in patients and treat them accordingly. Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena stated today that Sri Lanka has an oxygen need of 25 metric tons daily and that the current suppliers are more than capable of meeting this requirement and more. He also stated that the plans have been prepared to convert around 680 medical and surgical beds into ICU beds needed by COVID-19 patients if the need ever arises.
As Sri Lanka reported COVID-19 patients in the excess of 2,000 for a 5th consecutive day yesterday, the question as to whether the country's health system can hold up to the pressure has arisen. However, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardana offered reassurances that all measures have been taken to deal with any possible eventuality.
We are having nearly 140 ICU beds dedicated for COVID positive patients. At the moment, there are about nearly 72 patients in these dedicated COVID ICU beds, and we have another 680 beds which are meant for the other patients, that means medical and surgical ICU patients. But in case if we need to convert these for COVID patients, we have already done the planning, and we have had discussion regarding the oxygen requirement of this country. At the moment, our requirement is nearly about 25 tons, and the companies which are supplying the oxygen, two companies, they are able to provide more than this capacity, even 80 tons per day.
In the meantime, the epidemiology unit confirmed 2,269 COVID-19 cases in the country yesterday. Further, the Western Province has once again accounted for a majority of COVID-19 infections, with the Colombo district confirming the most, with 643 of the cases. The Gampaha and Kaluthara districts, meanwhile, recorded 301 and 121 infections, respectively. Meanwhile, Ratnapura reported 174 cases, while 155 infections were confirmed from Galle, 126 from Anuradhapura, 121 from Kaluthara, and 100 from Kurunegala. The districts of Kegalle, Polonnaruwa, Nuwara and Kandy recorded 91, 80, 67 and 61 cases of the virus, respectively. A further 330 cases were detected across 13 other districts, while 20 infections were reported from foreign arrivals. As for today, 889 COVID-19 infections have been confirmed so far. In the meantime, the country reported the highest number of deaths yesterday of 24, bringing the overall number to 892.
Nearly 13 deaths were above 70 years and 7 deaths were from 60 to 70 years. From 24 deaths, there are about 17 people died from COVID pneumonia. Some of them actually had comorbidities where they have underlying diseases.
In the meantime, the Sri Lanka Air Force is currently constructing a new COVID-19 treatment facility comprising of 5 wards at the Mullaeriyawa Base Hospital. The construction work was inspected today by Commander of the Air Force Air Marshal Sudarshana Padirana. Meanwhile, the country's recoveries rose to 110,108 today after 1,306 patients were discharged. With that being the case, the country's number of active cases currently stand at 26,102.
State Minister Sudarshini Fernando Pillai announced some good news for people over the age of 60 who have been so far left out of the country's vaccination program. The State Minister revealed that a decision has been taken to begin administering the Sinopharm vaccine to this age group. However, only those in good health and no prior medical conditions will be eligible. Meanwhile, Minister of Health Pavitra Vanyarachi stated that the vaccination program will be extended to the districts of Kandy, Kurunegala and Ratnapura after concluding inoculations in the Western Province. The government has ramped up measures to fast-track its vaccination program in the worst-hit Western Province, which doctors believe is the most effective solution to keep the public safe from the current virulent strain, which supposedly has 23 mutations in its genetic code. To date, 925,242 people have received the first dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, while 241,522 people have received both jabs. Meanwhile, the first jab of the Sputnik V vaccine has been administered to a total of 14,673 people. So far, 214,880 people have been vaccinated using the Sinopharm vaccine, the third vaccine used in the country's inoculation drive. In the meantime, State Minister of Primary Healthcare, Epidemics and COVID Disease Control, Dr. Sudarshini Fernando Pillai stated yesterday that citizens above the age of 60 with no health complications will be administered with the first dose of the Sinopharm vaccine. The decision comes at a time as experts say the mortality rate among this age group is on the rise. In the meantime, with the assistance of Triforce's personnel, the vaccination program worked off today as well in a number of areas in the Western Province.
Sinopharm vaccination is offered to all the Colombo citizens within the Colombo 1 to 15 limit today. We had 8 stations today, starting from Mattakuliya, Borella, Mahavatta and the southern Colombo areas. All these walk-in stations are accommodating 1,000 people, and the online channeling stations accommodate 500 people per day. So we aim to vaccinate around 6,500 to 7,000 people in the city of Colombo all these 3 days, today, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, even with the curfew. Today at this place at Mugalan Road, we have vaccinated around 750 people up to now, and we will be continuing the same vaccination programs in the next 3 days.
Meanwhile, the inoculation program for media personnel commenced today at the Sri Javardhanapura Hospital. In addition, employees of the Sri Lanka Transport Board too were vaccinated at the Thalangama depot today. In the meantime, Minister of Health Pavitra Vanniyarachchi announced today that vaccination drive will be extended to the Kandy, Kurunegala and Ratnapura districts after the drive in the Western Province is concluded.
බස්නාහිර පළාතේ දැනට ලක්ෂ 11ක ජනතාවක් සම්පූර්ණ එන්නත් කරණයට භාජනය කරලා තියෙනවා. මුළු රටේම මෙම රෝගය වැළැක්වීමට අපි එන්නත් කරණය සිදු කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මිලියන 13ක පමණ ජනතාවට. අවුරුදු 60ට වැඩි මේ රටේ ජනගහනය ඉන්නවා මිලියන 2.3ක්. ඒ වගේම අවුරුදු 40ත් 50ත් අතර ජනගහනය ඉන්නවා මිලියන 5.3ක්. ඒ වගේම අවුරුදු 30ත් 40ත් අතර ජනගහනය ඉන්නවා මිලියන 3.3ක්. ඒතර අවුරුදු 30න් උඩ ආයට තමයි අපි මේ එන්නත් කරණය ලබා දෙන්නේ. බස්නාහිර පළාතේ එන්නත් කරණය අවසන් වුණාම නුවර දිස්ත්‍රික්කය, කුරුණෑගල දිස්ත්‍රික්කය, රත්නපුර දිස්ත්‍රික්කය වැනි දිස්ත්‍රික්කවල එන්නත් කරණය පටන් ගන්නටත් ඊට සමගාමීව අනෙක් දිස්ත්‍රික්කවලත් එන්නත් ලැබෙන ආකාරය අනුව එන්නත් කරණය සිදු කිරීමටත් අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
The Ministry of Finance and the World Bank have signed an agreement for an additional financing facility to the tune of $80.5 million that will be utilized to purchase vaccines and strengthen its deployment program. The agreement was signed by Secretary to the Ministry of Finance S.R. Artigala and World Bank Country Director Fari Haddad Zervos yesterday.
The World Bank and the government of Sri Lanka have inked an additional financing agreement worth $80.5 million to help Sri Lanka access and distribute vaccines and strengthen its vaccination system and pandemic response. The agreement was signed by Secretary to the Ministry of Finance S.R. Artigala and World Bank Country Director for Sri Lanka Faris Haddad Zervos yesterday. Releasing a statement afterwards, the World Bank Country Director stated that solidarity and support of all stakeholders remains key to fighting the pandemic, and added that the World Bank remains responsive to the health priorities of Sri Lanka and its emergency needs. He added that effective deployment of the vaccines will help Sri Lanka protect its people, build human capital and facilitate inclusive economic recovery as well. The funds are part of the World Bank's COVID-19 Emergency Response and Health System Preparedness Project, with a total of $298.07 million, which has contributed to Sri Lanka's pandemic management and prevention efforts, the statement added. Further, it revealed that so far project funds have contributed to the provision of essential works, goods, services and consultancies for emergency pandemic management and prevention activities, including the procurement of medical and surgical consumables as well.
Sri Lanka's Muslim community celebrate the Eid festival today, marking the ending of the fasting period. However, the same as last year's celebrations are muted due to the current travel restrictions imposed across the country from yesterday. In his Eid greetings to the Muslim community today, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa rather expressed hope that the country's true Islamic devotees would collectively commit themselves with added determination to further strengthen harmony in the country.
Sri Lanka's Muslim community celebrate the holy festival of Ramadan today, which marks the end of the 40-day period of fasting, prayer and reflection. This year, the fasting period commenced on the 12th of April and ended today, following the official sighting of the crescent moon, which is traditionally proclaimed officially by the Colombo Grand Mosque. On Wednesday, the Colombo Grand Mosque announced today as the day of the festival. However, this year's festivities have been dampened by the introduction of island-wide travel restrictions from 11 p.m. last night, leaving Sri Lanka's Muslims to restrict their celebrations to their immediate families only. With that, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued his customary Eid greetings to the country's Muslim community. In his message, the President says that the social value of celebrating the holy month of Ramadan together, regardless of differences in status as a religious custom, is one that is highly praiseworthy. The President added that he has no doubt that during this year's festival, the wish for humanity to be free of the COVID-19 pandemic would be key among the wishes of the Muslim community. Further, the head of state says that the reconciliation revealed by Sri Lanka to the rest of the world through its efforts to build peace and brotherhood among the communities is a great example to the entire Muslim world. In conclusion, the president added that he believes that the true Islamic devotees would collectively commit themselves with added determination to further strengthen harmony in the country. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa stated that it is his belief that by having a correct idea of the hunger of others during the fasting period, Muslims will commit themselves for charitable deeds without any differences. The Premier added that throughout history, the Muslim people who have been disciplined in correct religious teachings have interacted with other races and religions in Sri Lankan society. Further, the Prime Minister expressed hope that despite the inability to celebrate the Eid rituals in a festive manner this year due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, religious rituals would be performed within the limits of the country's health guidelines. The Premier also took the opportunity to appreciate the contribution of all Muslims who avoided gathering in large numbers at mosques for worship during the fasting period, chose to perform religious rites in the safety of their homes.
The Department of Meteorology announced today that water levels in several reservoirs and rivers are rising and urged people residing in low-lying areas to stay vigilant. Meanwhile, Deputy Director of the Disaster Management Centre, Pradeep Kodipili, stated that guidelines have been issued to authorities on how to evacuate people from flooded areas in line with health and safety guidelines due to the ongoing pandemic situation.
As the low-pressure zone over the Southeast Arabian Sea continues to move towards Gujarat and Pakistan, Sri Lanka is set to experience more inclement weather. As such, many areas in the country have been experiencing heavy showers and strong gusty winds. The Department of Meteorology today issued a weather advisory warning of wind speeds up to 60 to 70 km per hour in the sea, extending from Kankasanture to Colombo via Mannar. The department also warned of wind speeds of up to 55 to 60 km per hour could be expected in the seas extending from Colombo to Hambantota via Galle.
As per the meteorological department, they have advised fishermen not to venture the sea area, especially in the Arabic Sea area or southwestern area of Sri Lanka. So that is too dangerous, and the wind speed could be expected more than 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. The rising water levels been identified in Kalani Ganga, Kalu Ganga, Ginganga, Nilwala Ganga. The warning for the landslide still be there for Kalutara, Ratnapura, Galle, Matara, Colombo and Kewal districts. People need to observe the signs of the landslide. That is very important thing. If any signs been observed, they need to move from these locations. The Disaster Management Center prepared a guideline and disseminated among all the stakeholders and the officials and to the district disaster management units to follow for the evacuations, because we need to follow all the health guidelines while we are evacuating the communities to the community centers.
Meanwhile, one individual died last night in an earth slip that occurred in the area of Varakapola. The victim's remains were recovered by the Sri Lanka Army rescue personnel and transported to the Varakapola hospital. In the meantime, the Sri Lankan Navy has deployed 10 relief teams in flood-prone areas in the western and southern provinces as water levels continue to rise across many waterways and rivers. In their operations last night, the Navy teams were successful in rescuing 6 flood victims trapped by rising water levels of the Ginganga in Galle. Also in Galle, the remains of a man who was swept away in the floods was recovered this morning by area residents. The deceased was identified as a 32-year-old father of 2 from the Alutwatta area in Galle. Meanwhile, the Disaster Management Centre has reported the blockage of the bypass road in Avisavella due to a minor landslide. The centre has advised motorists to use the Colombo-Ratnapura road by passing the Avisavella bus stand as steps are taken to clear the blockage. In the meantime, the water levels in the Kalani River, the Gin River and the Kalu River, as well as the Attanagalu, Kudaoya, Daduroya and Kirimaroya reservoirs are reportedly on the rise. The Irrigation Department has reported that the water levels in the Kalani River has risen and could pose some danger to residents living in the Hanvella and Nagalanvidya areas. The department has hence warned people living in low-lying areas along this section to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7 on the Richter scale was reported to have occurred off the coast of the northern Sumatra island at around 12 p.m. today. However, the National Tsunami Early Warning Centre of the Department of Meteorology announced that Sri Lanka's coastal areas are safe with no tsunami threat.
Police Terrorism Investigation Division personnel have arrested a 38-year-old individual in Muttur for allegedly conducting classes that propagated extremist ideologies in 2018. According to police spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana, the suspect had conducted classes on extremist ideologies for GCE ordinary level and advanced level students on the instructions of Easter attack mastermind Zahran Hashim. Meanwhile, the police spokesperson also revealed that several suspects currently incarcerated for involvement in training by Zahran Hashim have been transferred to TID custody for further interrogations.
The Terrorist Investigation Division and CID are jointly conducting investigation into the Easter Sunday incident. In addition, both institutions are conducting investigation into connected incidents happened before and after the Easter Sunday incident. Accordingly, yesterday, 38-year-old person of Iqbal Road, Muttur, has been arrested in connection with the offence of organizing classes of extremism in Muttur area in December 2018 for school leavers in Muttur area on instructions of Zahran Hashim, and he has been brought to the TID and he will be detained under the PTA. In addition to that, another 2 suspects have been taken into TID custody from the Kegol and Polonnaruwa prison in terms of the provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Both suspects had trained under Zahran Hashim and they had been remanded in respect of various offences soon after the Easter Sunday incident. However, further investigation revealed that this person involved in training courses also.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.